Well. For the first time in a very long time, I can say good morning, everyone. It's Rob, and I hope you're somewhere in the world where it is the evening because this is a very special daytime edition of the Nocturnal Knockout, a Brass Ring Media podcast right here on the One True Sport YouTube channel, also up on Twitter. If you are checking in, what is up, guys? How are you guys doing? Back and forth with Dom, and you may be going crazy. You may be going crazy. I only talked to you guys a couple of nights ago, but here's the thing. I had a little bit of extra time today. Is what happened. I had a little bit of extra time, and I wanted to talk to you guys one more time before the Rumble and have a little bit more fun with you guys, a little traditional Nocturnal Knockout style. We've been doing the post shows. We've been having fun. I've been interacting with you guys, but that's us in the evening. I wanted to do it during the day, and I wanted to talk about a couple of things. I want to bring up just a few points from the promo we had closing Raw this past Monday. I felt like maybe with a day or two to ingest some of it. I have some thoughts about it, specifically Cody's claim in it and the validity of some of Cody's claims. I want to inspect something about that. I wonder if he has really been chasing CM Punk all this time. And I wonder what all this actually means for the mid 2000s OVW era. An era of wrestling that I think is mostly forgotten, not necessarily because it's lost to history, but thought of as a lesser than era compared to what came right before it and what came after it in terms of developmental. But then the real meat of this show, as you can hopefully see in the description, is I want to break something down with you guys. There was a lot of stakes that were set forth in that promo between Punk and Cody on Monday night. And in fact, all of Raw on Monday was a reiteration of all of those stakes and everything that is on the line on Saturday. Takes a minute to adjust to. And it's unlike any other sport in that you have this one golden ticket that virtually anyone can have a shot at. You basically only got to declare yourself eligible for the match and you can seemingly get into it. That doesn't exist in any other sport. However, in other sports, there tends to be a path to a singular path to get to a championship opportunity. There were 4 NFL teams this past Sunday that won a game to receive a championship opportunity. And I know for a fact that in the NFL, that is the only way that you get a title shot. Now, in the world of professional wrestling, there are several different ways to get a title shot. You can lose a bunch of matches. You can win a briefcase. You can win a Royal Rumble, or you can just do some other stuff. But what I want to break down, actually, when I have a little fun with this, is and let me look at my list here to count them. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different WWE superstars over the years since 1993 that have headlined a WrestleMania without winning the Royal Rumble. There is a golden group of people, and we're going to break down exactly how they got to main event WrestleMania and some of the results of that. And maybe if some of them should have won Royal Rumbles. We're going to spend most of the show on that. But I do want to break down some things on the promo. The Chamber is on is the other way to get there. That's why I think John Cena is getting there this year, if he gets there at all. You could be Goldberg and get a title shot anytime you want. So the key is there. You just have to yell loudly. Like, I wish that worked in other forms of media and life. I wish I could go. Who can I go to? Who's like the top of the podcast game? I don't know. Who's not polarizing on top of the podcast game? Bill Burr or someone. And I could just be like, Bill Burr, you're next. And then I'm the top podcaster in the world. Wade Keller, you're next. Boom. I get a shot at him. Is that how that should work? That's how I want it to work. No, there is a little bit of a meritocracy in WWE, just slightly, but not much. And we're going to discuss it later. End of the coffee. We're one pot in. We'll switch to the standard ginger ale in a little bit, but we'll stick to coffee for now. Very end of it. But I like coffee for the win. I can't say swig of coffee or swig of ginger ale or even swig of beer for the working man when I'm literally playing hooky from work today. I don't think that would be appropriate. Hopefully you're not playing hooky from work. Hopefully you've got me like in your ear and you're writing some report of some meaningless job that you're at and you're thinking about how to main event WrestleMania without winning the Rumble. Ron Ross Sap, you're next. Is that what you want, Azan? Yeah, check out Sean Ross this week. He's got all the scoops on PCO. What happened there? This is all very, very important things for us to break down on a Royal Rumble Wednesday. It's Royal Rumble season, though. Are you guys excited? I think this is about as excited, if you're going to be excited for a Royal Rumble, as you can possibly be. If you love the concept, this wide open concept where all these big stars are vying for the top spot. And it's not exciting under two circumstances. It's not exciting when the guy that you don't want to win is obviously going to win. That sucks. See 2013. See 2012. That's not very fun. And there's usually not a lot of build around anything else involved in the match. So that's a lot of TV time and over an hour of match time on a pay-per-view that is dedicated to nothing. The other time that that it really sucks is maybe it's someone you want, but it's uber predictable. So there's really nothing to it. Now, Azan, I want to clarify this comment here because there are two things here, and I want to know what you're saying. Azan typed in the chat, which I hope all you guys do. Type in the chat, send a super chat if you feel so inclined. If you have a little more cash in the early morning. But Azan says he hopes there's no old fats this year. No old fats or old farts, because I think those are two different things, Azan. Who's an old fat and who's an old fart? Like an old guy that's in really good shape, that would not be an old fart, an old fat. Like Bob Backlund is not an old fat, right? I'm trying to think of old heavyset guys that are still with us to say if they are an old fat, but I will not declare any of them because I'm sure you guys will correct me and point out that person may actually have passed away, and that wouldn't be very fun. Glad you could play along, Azan. Glad we're here for you humor. But yeah, there was tons of stakes, and they've done the gimmick. No one from the Attitude Era. Who is left? I mean, obviously the Rock is there. You could always get a Glenn Jacobs appearance. It's a very important reporting that we have to put up here. He said Gable finally won a speed semifinals. He beat Saban, Gable versus Dragon Lee for the speed title, and everyone seemed to forget. Oh, how could we forget? How could we forget the very important speed title, the prestigious the speed title? I remember when Gordon Soley would call the matches about the speed title. That's where JR got his inspiration from. It's gone down the line, obviously, from there. No, not the speed title, the big title, the one that Cody has, the real title. I think there's a pretty good chance that the Rumble winner could go after the other champion this year, but let's face it, even though they're giving Gunther a little bit of time on Raw, the main champion right now is Cody. He is the centerpiece of the show when Roman Reigns isn't there. I think that is very, very obvious. Very close by CM Punk. CM Punk's very close, but CM Punk's not really the centerpiece of the company. He's just one of the more over guys on every show that he's on. But I like when they do the gimmick of the guy confronting the champion. Now, it's a little weird when they do it with the total assumption that he's going to be the champion, which I think most people believe that Cody will walk into WrestleMania as the champion. I don't think many of us have Kevin Owens or someone at the Chamber suddenly ending this reign. They've done it before where they've ended long reigns right before WrestleMania to do something else. I do not think that is the case here. It's not like Cody from a reality standpoint is struggling. Maybe in kayfabe he is struggling, and they worked that into the promo and to the whole deal of the night. So really it's with everyone declaring for the Rumble. Remember in 2002, everybody was going around confronting The Rock, which is kind of funny. Maybe we'll put a pin in that and talk about that later because they assumed The Rock was going to beat Chris Jericho at the No Way Out pay-per-view, which of course was the biggest flag that he wasn't going to beat, wasn't going to beat Jericho on that pay-per-view. And everyone was saying that, I'm coming for you. Or I should thought the Royal Rumble, I'm coming for you. Everyone confronted The Rock, basically saying, I am challenging you as champion. And there's a little bit of that going on as Cody, much like Sammy, is involved in these multitude of storylines along with Drew McIntyre, and all of it kind of shores up around the bloodline, which even you could say to finish the storyline, easy for me to say, is a subset of the larger bloodline story. But this match, or whatever they were teasing between Punk and Cody, wasn't that. Exactly. Everyone is chasing Cody, and that's what they built this promo around. Everybody chasing him. Now I want to direct your guys' attention to something I know you guys are aware of, but it's been a long time since we've focused on it. Check this out. You guys recall this very, very, very famous photo? Yeah, there it is. I want to say this was after like Survivor Series 2011, or maybe sometime in this. And this is the infamous photo of like the new guard. And for years, this was mocked as like the what could have been photo. I mean, look at what we got in this photo. We have Evan Bourne and Kofi Kingston holding the little penny belts. We have Beth Phoenix holding the now antiquated Divas Championship. Zack Ryder, the former or the current Matt Cardona, Mr. Chelsea Green, holding the U.S. title. Woo, woo, woo. You have the TLC 2011. That makes more sense because that's when Brian would have cashed in, right? And you have Brian, the yes man there, just cashing in on Mark Henry or Big Show or some combination of big dudes having his title. The newly minted, again, because what's old is new, Intercontinental Champion Cody Rhodes there in the corner, all white, looking very dashy. And in the middle, the centerpiece, CM Punk. At the beginning of that 400 plus day reign that he talked about in Raw, that really burned him out. Now, over the years, this photo has taken on all kinds of lives of its own. At the time of where I'm pulling this screen grab off of, this is off of a Reddit post from several years ago. And it says, guess which ones are not in AEW right now. And if I were to look at it, I don't know that Beth has ever shown up in AEW, but I believe she's the only one never, she hasn't, and Kofi hasn't. Kofi has been with the Federation, the E, the entire time. Everyone else has seemingly gone to AEW for seemingly the same reason. Not only were these not the guys, these guys, as you put in the chat there, Azan, these goofs, no one watched these guys on top back in the day. And Cody has even talked about where he had to sort of like feel comforted in himself that, it was the least amount of time people had ever watched wrestling. For all the complaining online we did, myself included, and I took part in this as much as anyone, about these guys not getting pushed. As a result, I would say more of the environment they were in, not them as stars, but as a result of the environment that they were operating in, these guys were not stars. And TV took a real tumble from a ratings perspective and an interest perspective and all of that until we got back to The Rock, Cena, Triple H, Undertaker, and all business as usual later on. That is true. That is true, Azan. Matt Sydal has had his own issues over the year. Great RKO he's got, though. Great RKO. But you see there's that sort of vaunted class of 2011. And when I'm looking at that, I see the class of 2011, and I get it. But there's something else that stands out to me when I see people like Cardona and Beth Phoenix and Kofi Kingston and CM Punk. And I assume Evan Bourne, but I'm not quite sure about this. And Cody. What do all of those competitors have in common? I'll give you a second to think about it while I take a sip of coffee. Correct, is on. You passed the test. Also, coffee at the end is cool when it's at that perfect temperature, but you're trying to drink really fast. Those are OVW guys. And they alluded to that in the promo. Now, some guys get to be OVW guys, and some guys aren't. CM Punk never really gets credit for being an OVW guy. I think a guy like CM Punk, the implication, and justifiably so, was that he was already a finished product whenever he came into OVW. And then they just kind of sharpened the edges, or as the narrative says, he was so advanced. He's writing TV, he's doing all this stuff with Cornette and Heyman and putting himself out there and gets himself to ECW. ECW on TNN, of course, where he was, the one piece of new blood that show had. Him and the zombie dude. They were carrying it. Speaking of OVW, and that is essentially what the original ECW show was a televised OVW show. Now, OVW has a weird place, I think, in history and the way we look at it. In one sense, we look back really fondly on OVW. If we're talking about the early part of the decade, the early 2000s, we look at OVW, I think justifiably so, as this factory that created all these main eventers. We know about the core four of Brock and Cena and Batista and Orton, not to mention guys like Shelton Benjamin that are there, Sylvester Terkay that are around, all of those guys. That's a great class. But then you fast forward it to the mid 2000s, and I think the distinction that often gets made online, and probably not unfair, is you had a change in talent relations in the company at the time. All of the guys I mentioned kind of fit the mold of the guys that came in the previous classes. The guys that were signed away from WCW, like the Austins and the Foleys and the Triple H's, and a homegrown guy or two like The Rock. Good gun your shit on in case anyone didn't know the D'Angelo. Oh, I got what you're saying. We'll put that up there. Yeah, you gotta follow. We have like way too much content going on in this channel right now. We've got E following you. As I was saying about the OVW era, this mid 2000s era, I think it gets thought of as the Johnny Ace era, where they were hiring the guys that maybe weren't the greatest. And when a lot of these guys got to TV, they were not thought of as the guys that should have been pushed. In fact, you were thinking of guys like CM Punk, despite coming from OVW. You were thinking of guys like that, guys that maybe came more from the indies as the talented guys to push the next generation. Fast forward a couple years ago, they shift their focus to FCW. Now, FCW produces the next group of main eventers. And obviously, you think of guys that were part of FCW and NXT, the Shield era of guys, the Wyatt era of guys, all those guys. And eventually that transitions into NXT. And that is thought of as a fertile time of talent, all coming from the indies, but not this mid 2000s period. Now, I would say throughout history, guys like Drew McIntyre and Cody Rhodes and Kofi Kingston, they have worn Dolph Ziggler, maybe Chris Masters. They've worn that OVW tag as not necessarily John Morrison, a badge of honor, right? It's something that maybe was a bit of a deterrent. It's a little bit of a scarlet letter. Like, you didn't come out of those initial classes where you were so recruited, nor did you come out of those late classes where you were seasoned on the indies. You were a WWE product. You were thought of if you came out of OVW in the mid 2000s. Now, that's not true. There's plenty of great performers in there. And a lot of the next generation of stars did come out of there, but you might say some of those guys were reduced. Guys like Miz, guys like Ryder, a whole bunch of guys that you have simply forgotten about over the years. Does Mason Ryan count as that, or is he more of an FCW guy? I don't know. They've also got rid of guys in OVW, like a Kenny Omega, that maybe they shouldn't have. But all that brings me back to this initial thing that Cody said in the promo, that back in the OVW days, he was chasing CM Punk. They were all chasing CM Punk, and that certainly is the narrative. But when it talks about chasing him, I think it really is only from the perspective of a cool factor he's been chasing. If you look at the professional wrestling careers, these guys are actually pretty even over the years. And I wonder if you can argue that there is some validity to Cody's claim that at least at this point, he has surpassed CM Punk. Hard to say. But if you look back at their histories, for a big part of their career, I think Cody Rhodes is positioned slightly ahead of CM Punk until CM Punk, well, completely and totally took the mantle from him. If you look back at how they came into the company, CM Punk is the straight edge superstar over on that side of the things. Cody Rhodes is the blue chipper. He's coming in almost like The Rock and eventually lands up with DiBiase, and that leads him to the Legacy, where he is well protected and at the top of that card. Not to say CM Punk isn't doing anything at this point. He's winning Money in the Banks. He's in the middle of the card. He's in ECW. He's getting great praise, but he's not at the top of the card in the same way that Cody is. Not necessarily that Cody earned that spot. It was Cody's who he was, his proximity to power, and his talent. Let's face it. That was all putting him in there. And if you look at their first few WrestleManias, you wonder who was actually more featured because, yes, Punk was further along, but they both basically had matches against guys like Mysterio, guys like Orton. They were in that same basic mix. And yes, I will grant you, CM Punk, if you went on the internet in that time period, would be way more respected than Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes had his fan back then. And that's the era where you started to see how awesome it was that he poured everything into his work. You would maybe say the opposite about CM Punk in that era. Some people would criticize him for not pouring everything into his work. Now, obviously, he became burnt out. But I think this photo that I was showing on the screen really speaks to where it all changes and what we're trying to do now. We're trying to get 2011 completely remediated here with this program. What is the results of that year? If you look back to that year, Cody wasn't doing much in the middle of the year. At the beginning of the year, it's great. He's facing Rey Mysterio. You might have had the biggest match at that point for CM Punk when he's facing Randy Orton, but he really feels like he should be in the title picture. What separated them, the two, was something I think Cody was always a little jealous of, was maybe the pipe bomb. Now, I don't mean jealous in that like, oh, I should be doing that, but Cody obviously is someone that wanted to say what was on his mind a little more so than he had been given it. Cody's version of a pipe bomb was that like resignation letter that he sent back in 2016. Cody left WWE, but he didn't walk out. He went off to seek greener pastures. It was less of what he did in the anger that Punk held, although he had, negative things to say about the company. In their time away, though, it's hard to argue who actually became the bigger star because Punk was already this level of star. Cody built that seemingly without the WWE hype away from him and built that into that through the indies and AEW. When they go to AEW, though, I think very clearly you can see a connection between the decline of Cody and the injection of CM Punk. CM Punk immediately made Cody uncool in that company. And we all assumed at the time that there was a big rift between the two of them. Now, there's a lot of other booking things that happened to be where Cody got de-emphasized, but very much they represented a different side of the coin. Cody, this American nightmare, he's the son of Dusty. Meanwhile, you have the kid that can't get along with anyone in CM Punk. And you have that dynamic the entire time, up to and including Cody's departure. Now, they do have the most interesting departures from AEW. And while we know so much about Punks and we want to know more, the one we always will want to know about, the Holy Grail, will be Cody's departure from that company. But since they've been back, I mean, who has actually been the bigger star? Cody's been pushed massively. And they both got hurt early on into their tenures to not really prove what it is they have. So do you want to see this match? Did that promo sell it for you? And is Cody right? Has he surpassed CM Punk? Is that another dragon that CM Punk needs to slay? Now, speaking of those dragons CM Punk needs to slay, I think the biggest dragon he needs to slay, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, and we're going to keep talking about it going forward, is the dragon of, not the American dragon, no. That guy got to slay it too, of winning the Royal Rumble. It's not quite Sheamus having accomplished everything, but not have accomplished this one thing on this secondary title. Not winning the Royal Rumble, as we discussed a couple weeks ago, from a kayfabe perspective, has actually adversely affected CM Punk's kayfabe career. The biggest thing that he has left on that bucket list is that main event of WrestleMania, that headline of WrestleMania. And while a lot of it is storyline, there is obviously tons of truth to it. The one thing when it comes to absolute booking that he would have cited on the 2014 podcast, he took lots of shots at the company, and most of them were due to medical and being out of touch. But his personal thing, his goal in wrestling was to main event WrestleMania. Now, I'm sure everybody who's ever wanted to be in wrestling has had that goal. But when you get to the point of CM Punk, when you do get to check a lot of things off that bucket list, there's only so much left to do. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the ways to do it is by winning the Royal Rumble. It's a pretty surefire way of doing it, even though, as we know, not everyone who's done it, see, Alberto Del Rio, has been able to headline WrestleMania. Hell, John Cena won the Rumble once and didn't even headline WrestleMania. I think if they do this to that point, I think Cody's heel turn, like that is sort of the point of this, even though it's the one time you can do some stuff a little bit different with Punk and still keep Punk in his old guard position. But Punk, from a kayfabe perspective, really needs to win this match because he put the stakes on there. As I reference back, just like this past Sunday, Josh Allen can never win a Super Bowl. Why can he never win a Super Bowl? Not because he's not good enough to win a Super Bowl. He's not good enough to beat Patrick Mahomes. Those are two different things. In kayfabe, CM Punk has not been good enough to win the Royal Rumble. And it's holding him back. It's an issue for him. That's why there's such stakes. That's why Roman Reigns had to declare for the Rumble. That's why Cena's in the Rumble. But all these guys are in the Rumble. Now, that seems like a surefire way to get to WrestleMania because if you play your cards right, it's a guarantee. But there are other ways of doing it. So let's talk about some ways to get to WrestleMania without necessarily having to win the big Royal Rumble match. Let's figure out how to do it. So if you look at it, the whole history of the Royal Rumble obviously goes back to the late 80s, but it's not till 1992 and 1993 that you can really see that the Rumble directly affects the WrestleMania main event, or at least as explicitly as it does in that time period. Obviously, in 1992, the title was on the line in the Rumble, so whoever was going to win it was going to have a pretty good shot at a golden ticket to WrestleMania. It wasn't though till 1993 that it was an official thing that it was your golden ticket. And in that time period, there have been a few wrestlers that have found ways to main event WrestleManias without actually winning the Royal Rumble. The first person I want to talk about is probably the most polarizing person on this list, and someone that Jeezy, tell us how you really felt. Someone that it's amazing that they didn't win a Rumble because they did everything else. And who I am talking about, of course, is the late great Sid Eudy. Now, Sid is amazing. Sid main evented 2 WrestleManias in his time. But the only reason that he really main evented these WrestleManias is because he happened to just be around the company when they were in times of extreme transition and upheaval. Now, that's not a knock on Sid. For like over a decade, people looked at Sid as the answer to all their problems. People in wrestling promotions really wanted Sid to come in. I mean, come on, why wouldn't you? And at like 6'9", it's amazing that Vince never actually booked Sid to win a Royal Rumble, despite headlining WrestleMania on 2 different occasions. And there was a time where I would say Sid was thought of as like this joke, as the most unlikely champion ever, the most unlikely 2-time WrestleMania headliner ever. And that may still be the case. But that kind of undersells the fact that 2 different times, Sid was the people's choice over the company's choice in multiple ways. So long before it became fashionable to boo the babyface, Sid was being cheered over these faces of the company, over these major politicians like Hulk Hogan and Shawn Michaels that were, from different perspectives, struggling to connect to the audience. Before Sid became a meme, he was like legit cool. I mean, the guy was a horseman in WCW, and despite what Flair would have to say about him, he was a big deal, and they probably should have pushed him further. And he was a big deal when he came into WWE. Despite debuting him off of TV, he became a top babyface very, very quickly. So much so that in early 1992, when he was completely screwed out of the Royal Rumble, the crowd turned on Hogan and cheered for him. People often forget the great, with a tear in my eye. The whole reason that happened is because Hogan just pulled Sid down. Now, we've seen that in a Royal Rumble, and we know that's a heelish move, or at least a babyface response to something heelish that is happening. Nah, No, 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 not my man, the Hulkster, not the MAGA Hulkster. No, no, no. He gets eliminated. He goes to shake poor Sid's hand. Sid is a upstanding softball playing gentleman. Goes in for the handshake and just gets thrown over by a combination of Hogan and Flair. How's this guy not the biggest babyface in the company? He got to get eliminated by a team of Hogan and Flair. And then, of course, you have the Jack Tunney presser where they announce the title shot that Hogan is going to get with Flair. Now, why they didn't go with Hogan and Flair is the stuff of legends. I think there's been books about it. There's documentaries about it. All of that good stuff. Ultimately, they decided not to do it. But fortunately for Sid, his proximity to who he was working with mattered more than where he was actually at on the corridor with the company, because so what that he didn't win the Rumble? He was still the main event because the main event was Hogan. It's not like they were going to close a show without Hogan closing it. Just because Hogan wasn't against Flair, that didn't matter. Threw that to the mid card, which is actually a much better match with Flair. And this they main evented. Sid and Hogan main evented in Indianapolis. So maybe we'll get a call back to that on Saturday. But yes, that was the terrible main event that didn't even get a finish. And we had blown cues. We had Papa Shango out there with smoke. We had the Undertaker throwing up. I don't know what the hell we had. It was a mess. And unfortunately for Sid, nobody really remembers that he main evented the WrestleMania. People just more remembered that the finish was botched and Hogan and Flair didn't happen. Now, from there, Sid did take a little bit of a detour back to WCW, but hit some issues. Snip, snip, snip. I don't want to speak ill of the dead. So he ended up coming back over. That's why my man Anderson carries a gun these days, because you can never be too careful. But again, in the Federation, Sid found himself actually very over. It was Sid that was called upon to replace Vader as Michael's opponent for months and months. This big program that was planned with Vader, Sid actually ends up having to take his place because, Vader just wasn't getting it done. That storyline they were doing with Cornette wasn't really working. And you have the big match at Survivor Series 1996. Now, Survivor Series 1996, that's a cornerstone pay-per-view. That's a debut of The Rock. You have matches. You have stuff going on with Triple H. You have the big Austin and Brett match on that card. That's the kind of like the proto start of the Attitude Era. But something else that was a little Attitude Era-y that doesn't always get talked about is that main event where Sid in the Garden was cheered wildly once again over the company's top babyface in Shawn Michaels. Now, this time, I think the bloom was off the rose of Sid a lot sooner than before. Pretty famously, right after this pay-per-view, as the new champ, they put the championship on Sid. Sid is the champion, so he can drop the title to Shawn Michaels in San Antonio at the Rumble, setting up this big Royal Rumble title match. So Sid's not going to be at the Rumble this year. No. He's got the title. Well, he no-shows the press conference like immediately after he wins the title. So that was great. We do get to the match. It's a fairly entertaining match. You got Jose Lothario involved in it, but it's really well received. Hometown hero HBK gets his San Antonio pop. Now, again, Sid is always the beneficiary of other people's weird behavior. Sid had plenty of his own weird behavior, but he benefited off of other people's weird behavior. Like Shawn Michaels losing his smile. That was very beneficial for Sid in kayfabe. Now, according to Bruce Pritchard, Sid was always going to work with The Undertaker at WrestleMania 13. But when they had to reshuffle the title stuff, his program became the main event title program. So, if I recall, Shawn Michaels loses his smile. They have a fatal four-way to determine who the new champion is, and then Sid immediately beats Bret Hart. A catalyst to the Bret Hart heel turn. Now, the match at Mania with Undertaker is terrible. It's repetitive. Other people are getting involved. And there's that little rumor about the end of the match, which we won't get into. And Sid was pretty irreliable after that and was basically done in the company almost permanently. The next thing we know about Sid, he's showing up in ECW. He has the big leg break on WCW. And then he's in that post-career kind of meme phase. You got to give Sid credit, though. Back in the late 90s, he's sort of the catalyst to the Attitude Era. He's like right there as all the Attitude Era stuff is happening, and he helps us get to the Attitude Era. But I am stunned that we never actually got another Sid Royal Rumble appearance. I know there was issues that he had with the company, but they did bring him in for that Raw 1000, I want to say, and they brought him in for the angle with Heath Slater and all of those legends. I'm just shocked we never got a Royal Rumble appearance for Sid. I'd have popped for it. Everyone would have popped for it. Despite everything people say about Sid, guy was over. Like, and under no conventions should he have been over in the way he was. Like, yes, I think the fans that were watching the TV were always into guys like Warrior, who you kind of like, how were they over? Yes, they were over, but or even guys like Luger. But Sid had a connection with the audience pretty much everywhere he went. That was on a little bit of a different level, and can't happen now. But I wish it could. I wish Sid could have eliminate more people from the Royal Rumble, because damn it, he was screwed in '92, and I want restitution. Now, again, I say all that about the Royal Rumble, but it probably wasn't that important ultimately to Sid that he didn't win the Royal Rumble, because I mean, he got to main event 2 WrestleManias. And no one would ever argue that Sid was one of the great WrestleMania performers of all time. But or Royal Rumble or WrestleMania performers. Now, someone who isn't one of the great WrestleMania performers of all time, but has had great matches and moments at the Royal Rumble, is the next guy we're going to talk about. Let's talk about Mick Foley. Now, Mick Foley is an extremely accomplished competitor at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. He just happens to not be very accomplished in the Royal Rumble match itself. His debut in the match came in '97, and he was fine in there. Him and The Undertaker having their things happening there. And it was awesome in '98 when he was the 3 faces of Foley. That was so cool, despite like all those chair shots he takes to the head in that match. Good God. But Foley's Royal Rumble legend really comes down to the title matches that he would have at that show. Absolutely, it was on. If you go back to 1999, we know how interesting that title match he had with The Rock was. The I Quit match, all the chairs, all the CTE. It's literally the central storyline in a documentary. We had bad reality shows made by Noel Foley in that clown in 2016 because of this damn match. Now, it's not even a good match. It's actually kind of a needlessly violent match that, quote unquote, doesn't really tell a great story, although it's very dramatic. But it's a big deal, and it kept him, obviously, part of what kept him out of the main event. But that's not really true, because Foley would regain the title and then lose it again. Foley would be a 2-time champion and had plenty of momentum going into WrestleMania that year. And all of this, what I'm about to say, is I'm paraphrasing from Foley's second book. But Mick Foley, depending on who you were asking backstage, was to be in the main event of WrestleMania 15. It's funny to think about, but they weren't quite confident in going with The Rock and Austin as a headline main event at WrestleMania 15. And let's face it, I was talking about Holy Foley. Oh, you got me. Holy Foley was not better than Total Divas. I will fight you to the death on that one. The WrestleMania 15 main event is another one that's sort of shrouded in mystery, because according to Foley's book, there was a push for him to make it a triple threat between The Rock, Austin, and Foley. After all, Foley had been key in getting The Rock over. He was involved in that side, and it was Undertaker and Austin on this side. Now, Undertaker really wasn't in a title position, and he was transitioning into the boss man. And there wasn't a lot to do with Mick Foley, but you did have the big nasty Paul White around, who had just acquired from WCW, which, looking back, probably they would have just liked him to win the Rumble if they could have him a month before. He had debuted at the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where another title program that Mick Foley had with The Rock. So everything was going in circles, and according to the narrative Foley put out, there were 2 different schools of thought. At that point, the WrestleMania main event, other than the first WrestleMania, had to be a one-on-one match. That was the way things were done. Now, some people, and it sounds like people from the Click side of things in particular, Shawn Michaels, who is the on-screen commissioner, but not actually involved, as a character, really a competitor on the show, is advocating for Mick Foley to be in the match. Now, read into it why they were doing that and why they would want to sabotage who would be in that match. Because as we all know, I may not take the Wade Keller, we must never have a triple threat philosophy, but triple threat does weaken and does dilute it. Or maybe it could have been a 4-way. Who knows? But in the end of the day, Mick Foley ended up getting disqualified to win a referee's match at the beginning of WrestleMania 15, went to the hospital and counted the pinfall. That was his involvement in WrestleMania 15. He was part of the main event, but didn't really headline. Now, fast forward a year later, we have almost the inverse situation. Mick Foley, once again, is in a title match where he apparently doesn't traumatize his kids. In fact, he makes like a wrestling fan out of me. To this day, I might say that's maybe the best title match, or my personal favorite title match in the history of that company. Royal Rumble 2000, the street fight with Cactus Jack and Triple H. Once again, he's there making the next guy to be the next guy. He retires a month later at the No Way Out pay-per-view. And Foley cuts all these promos going into the No Way Out pay-per-view that he's not going to be one of these guys that, prostitutes himself for a retirement match. Kind of reference to guys probably at the time like a Terry Funk and guys we've seen in later years. Now, unlike guys like Ric Flair, who took about 2 years to break one of his retirement pledges, or a guy like Shawn Michaels, who took 8 years over in Saudi Arabia to break his retirement pledge, it only took Mick Foley about a month to break his before he was back in the WrestleMania main event. In the lamest way ever, being brought in by Linda McMahon just cuz, as a result of this whole cluster that was the WrestleMania main event. Again, not being able to get Austin quite back to appear, they weren't quite confident in putting Triple H and The Rock together to headline that thing. Again, what was the logic? I don't know. Bringing back Mick Foley, he did headline WrestleMania, but they even made a storyline out of this later that he never really had the WrestleMania moment. Now, Foley in his book talks about he did not want to be in that WrestleMania main event, said that he wanted to stick to his word. And he actually envisioned a case where WWE would file litigation against him for not fulfilling his contract. So he says that's why he went back. Now, I believe him that he didn't really want that WrestleMania main event because he has a terrible haircut and he's horribly out of shape and the match is terrible. But that match is so convoluted that it also included someone else who has headlined a WrestleMania main event without winning the Royal Rumble, kind of. And that would be Mr. Paul White, the Big Show. Now, in 2000, you can argue he did win the Royal Rumble. And in fact, The Rock even acknowledged such on Raw years later. Told him, "You all right." What was up with The Rock that night? He hit the nose candy a little bit. That's not defamatory, right? Maybe he had coffee. So technically, he won. And shout out to the McMahon-Helmsley era for, letting him into that main event. He did win the Royal Rumble. But after that, Big Show became a very, very important piece of the Royal Rumble. Big Show became the guy that 45 people would eliminate in the Royal Rumble. He became the guy where you go like, how is it that anyone is ever going to eliminate Big Show? And then he would get eliminated every year by 50 guys, except in 2004 when he eliminated himself with a front flip. Now, Big Show never really needed to win a Royal Rumble. I think the perfect role was for him to never win these Royal Rumbles. In fact, if he ever won one, he would be like the most unbeatable final boss. That all has to do, again, with the 2000 WrestleMania main event, which Big Show got brought in because Shane, he was on behalf of Shane. Remember that? The four McMahons? What would that look like now? If you got the four McMahons in a main event on pay-per-view, would that be an indictment? Would it be a Department of Ed hearing? What the hell would that meeting look like in 2024 with the four of them like on a Zoom call setting crap up? I'd like to see that. Also in the 2000 main event, at one point, when we have advertisement to firm this up, Chris Jericho was supposed to be a part of the match. And there's another guy who's headlined WrestleMania without winning the Royal Rumble. Now, Jericho has had some great returns at the Rumble. Think of 2013, 2012. Jericho gets a good pop at the Rumble, and in the later years, and even in his younger years, he generally is a featured performer in all the Rumble matches. Jericho is a really good professional wrestler that stays generally over on the cards. Do not talk to me about what's going on right now in AEW. But he's never really been the guy that would win the Royal Rumble. Now, poor guy, when he was on top at WrestleMania, he didn't need to win the Royal Rumble. After all, he had just defeated Austin and The Rock in the same night. But no one took it seriously that he was even going to be in the WrestleMania main event when it happened. And then it happened, and he was simply there as a prop to make Triple H's comeback look cooler. And he failed there. Now, after that, he was often in pursuits, but he was never really like a centerpiece guy in the company in that same kind of way as a guy who would win the Royal Rumble. Now, there's a guy that never needed to win a Royal Rumble, and it's probably better that he didn't, to be honest with you. Now, another guy who never needed to win a Royal Rumble, but it's kind of amazing that he didn't, was Kurt Angle. Now, Kurt Angle didn't win a Royal Rumble, but it's not because he didn't have a ton to do at WrestleMania like some of these other guys. Kurt Angle never won a Royal Rumble really as a result of being a heel as a top guy for most of his time in WWE. See, a lot of the guys that win the Royal Rumble, it's because they're on this specific babyface journey. And Kurt Angle was never really on that specific babyface journey in WWE. Angle, though, he's like Foley. He is a Royal Rumble legend. He just has legendary Royal Rumble matches, like he did at 01, which isn't that legendary, but he was in the title match. 03, his match with Benoit is fantastic. And 06, his match with Undertaker is really good. Now, at the years in between, when I think of like 2002, 2004, and 2005, he's a central figure in the Royal Rumble, and he generally would get himself back into the title scene, or his storyline would come out of whatever happened in his Royal Rumble appearance because he was presented as a favorite. So despite never winning the Rumble, he's presented in this really direct way as a big player in all the Rumbles he is in. There's been a little bit of revisionist history on Kurt Angle. Because he was so silly later in his career, people have tried to pretend like he wasn't pushed strong or booked hard because he was never the main babyface within the company. At WrestleMania, he was often like a final boss. He would find himself ways to get into these matches. It's also something to the fact of the time that he was on top is the time when you have two rosters. And it seemed like the WrestleMania main eventer would either be a SmackDown wrestler that would move to Raw or a Raw wrestler. So he was not on the side of doing things. So maybe you would say that that had to do with him not main eventing. But it was never really necessary. And again, it's fine that it didn't happen. Now, someone who has all the credibility in the world, like Angle, never needed to win the Rumble. Someone else who we would have never accepted winning the Rumble was The Miz. Now, despite that, The Miz found a way to get into WrestleMania the way that everyone else does. You just win the briefcase and cash in. That seems like the best way to get to WrestleMania. And if you think about it, when you look at The Miz, he's been in a ton of Royal Rumbles, and he's, upper mid-card guy. So he's had some moments in his Rumbles, but he's never really been in a position to win it. We've never thought he should win it. There's never a year where you really thought about him as the favorite from winning it. And when you think about him main eventing WrestleMania, when it comes to The Miz, he's the only guy in history that got to main event WrestleMania because the part-timers were coming in, because he wasn't that over, because John Cena was taking parts of the spotlight, because of all those reasons that would drive CM Punk crazy, were all the reasons that The Miz actually got to main event WrestleMania. And the last person we will talk about on this list is Daniel Bryan. Now, amazingly, Daniel Bryan shares something with Sid here. He's the only other guy on this list to headline 2 WrestleManias. Is that true, boss? That's amazing if that's a real stat. He's like the worst, whereas Kane's like the greatest. Kane is like the greatest Rumble performer to never really like win it. Miz is like the worst one to always be invited. That's funny. Is he better than Hornswoggle in the Rumble or like one of the announcers? Yeah, Daniel Bryan never won a Rumble, but he got to headline 2 main events. But holy hell, the Rumble match, super, super, super important in his WWE tenure. First off, like, no one really cared about Sheamus winning the 2012 Rumble. We knew what the main event, part of Punk's complaint, we knew what the main event was going to be to that year's show. And on the undercard, you got the inkling that it was going to be Sheamus, and people laughed about it. We got to put that on the screen. That Hornswoggle eliminated the Miz in 08. Hashtag never. That's like prime Hornswoggle too. 07 might be prime Hornswoggle, but those are the glory days. As I said, no one cared for Sheamus winning the 2012 Rumble. But D-Bry had to be so thankful that he lost in 18 seconds to Sheamus as a result of that win. And it really helped launch his true main event run in the company, despite holding the title, as we mentioned from that TLC 2011 photo. But let's face it, when it comes to Daniel Bryan's legacy, it is with the 2014 and 2015 Royal Rumble. I love that Daniel Bryan in the WWE, his role for a couple of years was simply to ruin the Royal Rumble. The Royal Rumble lost credibility as a brand because of this guy, and we are all better for it. We all know what happens. We don't got to recap it a ton, but in 2014, he has probably the best match of Bray Wyatt's career on the opener there. Everybody kind of thinks he's going to win it, although there's tons of momentum the way the storylines are going for Batista. But come on, this is set up. This is set up for Daniel Bryan to win right here. And poor Rey Mysterio being the number 30. Took years for Rey Mysterio. Rey Mysterio was just covering for that. Like, Dominic hates Rey because of that moment. I'm pretty sure Dominic was like a teenager and he was really into all his yes stuff. And Ray came out at number 30 and it broke Dominic's heart. That's what happened. And so Daniel Bryan's lack of presence, which meant he wasn't going to win the Rumble, completely soiled whatever they would have had, whatever heat they would have gotten out of Batista. It helped Roman Reigns in that night, but it completely killed everything. Now, Daniel Bryan was never advertised to main event WrestleMania following. We know everything that happened. CM Punk walking out, all the stuff. But even then, he had a match. That's a good point. And that was at the Rumble as well, boss, right? Is when you're referring to. We know what happened going into Daniel Bryan's big WrestleMania moment, but it was accomplished almost in spite of the Rumble. Fast forward a year, we're basically in the same situation, but worse. This time, Daniel Bryan is advertised for the Rumble, and aside some stuff with Roman Reigns, he is the focus. He is the main character of that match. And famously, he's eliminated in the middle of the match by Bray Wyatt. Shattered dreams go across the screen, and everyone turns on the match. The Big Show and Kane are out there sliding people over. The Rock can't save it. It's the last time Philly, it's like then, last Sunday in the 2017 Super Bowl. Biggest moments of emotion in Philadelphia sports history. Maybe the time they pelted Santa. I don't know. AI crossing over Jordan that one time was pretty cool. But that was the most passionate Philly ever was. They booed The Rock. Famously, The Rock got radicalized by it. Roman got radicalized by it. There was a snowstorm the next day. Just wild times, guys. All of that because Daniel Bryan didn't win the Royal Rumble. He didn't get himself into WrestleMania that year. And his career would go on hold for a couple of years. We talked about some of the other Rumble matches he had. He had the match against Styles, and he's sort of shoehorned, I would say, into the final WrestleMania that he did with the company, 37, with the triple threat with Edge and Roman, two guys who obviously have won some Royal Rumbles in their history. And that closes it up, the guys who main evented WrestleMania. I'm talking about night 2 WrestleMania. I'm not talking about night 1. Okay? The second night of WrestleMania. Guys who headlined without winning the Rumble. That is your list. And to recap, it is for which Rumble didn't seem right, Azan? Okay, so the wrestlers who didn't win the Rumble but closed the show. Sid, Foley, Big Show, Jericho, Angle, Miz, and D-Bry. WWE did a segment, JBL. So I remember that segment, and they involved Kurt Angle in that segment, David. I don't think they would do it. I think the direct involvement that WWE and the UFC have within the Trump administration would actually make it a bad business move for them to do it. I think they would get attention for doing it. They would get headlines for doing it. But right now, in this era of goodwill that they have, I just don't think that's a rail right now that they would touch. It would get tons of heat. But I don't even trust that they would do a good job with it, to be honest. Any last minute predictions you guys have for the Rumble? I'm gonna get out of here in a little bit. We've done it. We've about done our hour monologue. We've had some fun looking at the Punk and Cody promo and talking about this. Now the other side of it, and this would be a much more exhaustive list, is you could have the great Rumble performers that never won one, or the guys that should have won one. Obviously, I think if you look at this list, Big Show is a great Rumble performer, technically, that never won one, but it was never really the right time. Same thing with Kane. Kane's probably the best Rumble performer that there's ever been, but there was never really the time for him to win it. Although, God, in 01, for a second, you're kind of cheering for him because his performance in there. What's my favorite Rumble? Okay, it's a great question. I've been like sitting on this for a little while. So if we break it down, I love 90. So my default is always to say 92 because I think that Rumble is just What else do you say about the 92 Rumble? But if I from the star power, but really it's the commentary. I love the commentary of the 92 Rumble. It's one of the most rewatchable matches um in the company. That is weird. Dr. Ross, 04 would have been the time, I guess, for him to do that. Good to talk to you again, Dr. Ross. We haven't spoken in a while. Um 01 is probably my favorite from a while. So those 2001, 01 and 02. I love both of those Rumbles. Different reasons. Maven getting killed, Austin doing his thing in the O2. I find the O2 Rumble very, very, very fun. I think it's aged poorly because of what we talked about with the main event of WrestleMania 18. Obviously, 01, you just got Drew Carey out of 01. It's almost like a perfect Rumble in a lot of ways. And again, so I think 01 and 02 are similar to 92 in that, like, you have this transitional time in the company where the roster is kind of bloated. So you have so many things happening there. 97, we talked about earlier. 97 is not a bad one. I don't like the short one, the 96. 2000 is entertaining enough, even if the main event isn't great. 04, I have watched a million times. Now, we don't talk about 04 a lot because of who won. I think 04 is a really well put together Rumble. I don't think 05 is a great Rumble, but the highlights from 05 are amazing. The double elimination and Vince's quads and Daniel Pewter getting like killed is something else. 07, and I know I'm just sort of running down a bunch of Rumbles, but I'm thinking kind of off the top of my head. 07, I think the start and the ending of that Rumble is really cool. But I find everything in 07 very good and a little boring within the company. 08's a really hot Rumble. 08, Cena didn't get booed in the Garden. 08's a fun Rumble. As I mentioned, 08, 09, I'd never seen it. 2010, I find to be a boring Rumble. The Edge win was really disconnected. I think Punk's performance early was cool, and Shawn Michaels stuff was kind of cool in that, but that was, same thing with the next year where Punk's performance is good, but that Del Rio win wasn't anything. 2012 is not very good. 2013 is not very good. 2014 is not very good. 2015 is not very good. 2016 is a decent Rumble. The ending is just so sour. I think Ambrose was amazing in that Rumble, but the way they constructed it just didn't fit. Same thing with 17. I think Roman Reigns coming out late sort of soured that. No one was really into Randy Orton winning on that one, even though I picked him on Monday, and I think that's a very popular pick. 2018 was very good. That was a good Rumble, despite there not being a big payoff. But that was really the way they did that with Shinsuke, and that was really, they used Roman really well in that Rumble, I thought. I have no recollection of the 2019 Rumble. Oh, 2019. No, we don't talk about 16 or 17. 2019 is the Seth Rumble. That was early in the show, right? That show is so long. Both that show and WrestleMania are so long that all that stuff kind of ran out of steam. 2020 Rumble, I rewatched it recently. 04 was really good. I mentioned that earlier. 2020 was a very good Rumble. Now, I didn't appreciate it at the time. I went back and rewatched this. I was rewatching with my son the other day because he was mentioning how good of a Rumble it was. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's a little younger, so newer stuff has a bigger prominence to him. And I started watching it, and I was like, oh, I remember. This is the night that Kobe Bryant passed away. And that's all that anyone was kind of thinking about. Although that Rumble is great. It might have that Rumble broke Bruce Mitchell's brain for sure. But that Rumble with Brock being dominant, and then Drew getting the big babyface thing, and the things that we're doing with Keith Lee and Ricochet, that was a great Rumble. The Edge return was pretty big, but it's just the payoff. We didn't get the payoff at WrestleMania, so that would hurt that. But that's a great Rumble. The Rumble that Edge won, I thought was terrible. 2019 had Ronda's best single match. Was that against Sasha? 20 was good. 21. Yeah, and I kind of have the problem. I'll be honest. The last couple of years of WWE programming sometimes runs together in my head, so I don't have like the best catalog to remember those Rumbles. So I'm not doing good with surprises, Dr. Ross. Who's your surprise? I'm struggling because I think you're gonna have some TNA guys. There's been so many big names announced that it's like, who would be left to surprise and who would you even want to surprise? They're gonna be surprised. I think they're coming in on the women's side. And like, is Jordan Grace a surprise? Not really. Maybe get someone from a little more from the independent seed. Santina or Santana? You've been on that pick. You've been on that pick for a while, Masha. Okay. These aren't bad picks. Um, I think that we're not in an Royal Rumble era where there's like this big free agency buzz about a ton of people, like other than the people that have already showed up on TV. It's not like, ooh, when Pentagon going to show up, and he's showing up now. So I don't know that we get that. Really quickly, and then I got to get out of here. I got to go to a meeting for my kid here in a minute, so I have the day off for real. But no, I need to take sick days. Just do brass ring media. That's my bosses think I'm doing. Like, hopefully they don't see this. Like, yeah, the pipeline's bigger than I'm giving it credit for because the pipeline I think is more streamlined now. Boss, you're absolutely correct on that. Like, I'm not giving the pipeline enough credit. Jacob had two. Jacob's a good one. It's gonna be really interesting. The Roman of it all. I mean, some people have Roman winning. I haven't heard a lot of people pick that. The Roman of it all, I find super interesting. Let's close though. What are you guys' like WrestleMania traditions, like at home? Is it a food pay per view? Do you make food? Do you do pools? Do you do picks? Do you have big parties? Is it solo? Are you writing down? Let's close out with our Royal Rumble traditions. See, I have a few things. When my kids were little and there was just more people around here in the house, we used to do Royal Rumble bingo, which was very very fun for a couple of reasons. Hey Sean, hey, I heard you the other day, man. I haven't seen you in a while. I heard you the other day on the stream with Zach and Tyler, man. That's why I had to come back out, man. You're getting more FaceTime than me. What's up, Sean? Hey, Sean, if you get to catch it, doing pretty much every Raw post show and most pay per views. So go ahead and check it on. I hope you this is a classic like Nocturnal Knockout, even though it's in the middle of the day. Um, yeah, Royal Rumble bingos are fun. And then back then, me and my ex-wife would do it where we were all playing bingo, but we would take drinks while the things were happening. So like the Kofi spot was always a good spot to take a shot. So he's gonna get super stoned with a bunch of Coca-Cola. Um, and hang out with the friend. We make picks and we just get a bunch of finger foods usually. But yeah, and so it's funny because the last couple years I've been more busy or doing like this year. This year I'll be popping out with you guys, so it won't be much of a party. I'm gonna be there with the notepad. We'll have a bit of a party, I think, maybe on the show. Crack open some beers, maybe on the show to just sort of celebrate Saturday night, celebrate the Rumble. But now that it's on Saturday, that makes it extra fun. It's like WWE took the hint that the Super Bowl never did. So it's 6 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. Oh, it's not terrible. I mean, it's not ideal, but I don't know what your work situation is, Dr. Ross. Yeah. Maybe we should. I got to get you on, Sean. I need some other voices on the show. We can discuss a few things too. We should do a little segment here and there because I thought you did amazing. So the here's another thing about the year Kobe passed away. Making food was always my thing for the Rumbles, kind of a Sunday evening. I used to like to make food on Sundays. Nowadays, I think the Saturday pay per views are more of a party than a food making thing. If you catch my drift on the distinction between those, but I made some pretty good food, some pretty good meat. At least I thought was good meat on the Royal Rumble 2020. Now I found myself a little distracted as I would. I mean, technically, Austin's got 3 Rumble wins, David, but I was hanging out, outside. I was frying the meat on my little disc. I had my Modelo's going. I was ready for the Rumble that year. And then I got the notifications about Kobe and I just spent and now I think I burned I think I didn't burn my food, but I definitely cooked it completely. I want to make that clear. I cooked my food completely. It wasn't very good. But we went inside, the whole family ate. We watched the Royal Rumble. We had as good enough time as we could. My son was sick the next day. And my son was in the hospital that week, and it was a gastro issue. Now, I don't think I poisoned my son, but I think the distraction of the Rumble had something. I think he was distracted by Drew's victory, and that's why he ended up in the hospital. So I have a weird that might have started the pandemic. I don't know. I don't know what I'm accusing myself of, but that was weird. So since then, it's been pizzas, it's been subs, it's been that kind of stuff. I also like really Rumble week is the fun part. Rumbles are not rewatchable only on Rumble week. For whatever reason, I can rewatch Rumbles on Rumble week. Cena should have 3. He was supposed to win in 05. Yeah, that would have worked. Drew's victory started COVID. Yeah, maybe. I don't think it was Drew's victory. It was when Drew did the Claymore on Brock on that one Raw. That would get a ton of attention if they did something with Ronaldo. I mean, think of it similar to like how they did stuff with Tyson Fury and that. Goldberg's, yeah. I think Undertaker pinning AJ Styles might have started COVID, or Wiley Zhang and Joanna Jędrzejczyk beating the hell out of each other. And me going on a podcast to say that China could use a win and that'll be good times. That might have started COVID. Yeah, Drew's. And shout out to Drew though for making that, like really owning that as part of his character. I was a big critic of Drew as a babyface, and I still kind of am. But really, the character he's got going now, I mean, 5 thumbs up. 5 thumbs up. All right, guys. I got to get to my meeting. Don't remind us about that, Dr. Ross. I am going to check you guys out after the Rumble. It was so fun hanging out with you guys. It's fun hanging out in the morning. We should do the morning Nocturnal Knockout. I need to, quit my job or something so we can go ahead and do this more often because this was fun, guys. If you like this, go ahead and hop on, watch the replay, go on to Brass Ring Media, get the written takes on everything that's going on. Go ahead and hit us up on Substack. Go ahead and become a Patreon so you can see the Discord. And nobody's happy about Goldberg potentially coming back. Vent about that in the Discord. And of course, subscribe to One True Sport. Subscribe to Brass Ring Media. Hit us up on Twitter, RVD, all that good stuff. But I will talk to you guys Saturday night. Later, people.